If you're interested in one more way that a misalignment in the upper cervical spine can affect your health negatively, then check this episode out. It's about the MyoDural Bridge. It's not really talked about that much, but just from a biomechanical and functional standpoint, you'll see exactly why an injury or misalignment in the upper neck could cause health problems. And this is just one more way, one more way of many ways that a misalignment in the spine in the upper neck can cause lots of health issues. So enjoy. Hi there, I'm Dr. Kevin Leach here with the Chiropractic Deep Dive Podcast, bringing you the most important research and information on conservative primary spine care, upper cervical chiropractic care, and traditional chiropractic care. These research reviews, interviews, and episodes are made for you, whether you're a medical doctor, patient, or concerned family member or friend. The goal of these shows is to bring awareness of the importance of taking care of our spine and the impact it has on our health and the hundreds of different health conditions it could cause without us realizing it. I'm really trying to bring value with these, so I'd appreciate commenting on the videos, hitting the like button, and sharing them with as many people as you can. You never know who might need to see it. And consider subscribing to the channel so you can see all the other episodes and videos coming out. Thank you so much. I truly appreciate your support. Now on to the show. Okay, welcome back to the Upper Cervical Chiropractic Research Show. This is episode 16. I am Dr. Kevin Leach, and here with me, as usual, is Dr. Tyler Evans. How are you, sir?
Good to see you.
Good. And you remembered to say something so that the camera came to you. All right, so this episode review is the Cervical Myodural Bridge, a review of literature and clinical implications by Enix et al., published in the Journal of the Canadian Chiropractic Association. So this paper reviews the literature about what are called the cervical myodural bridges, which are soft tissue connections discovered relatively recently that connect deep cervical muscles from the posterior spinal cord to the dura. Which have been found to serve several important functions. And if these myodural bridges are injured, for example, in motor vehicle collisions, health consequences and conditions can result. So let's get into it a little bit. Dr. Evans, if you want to just tell everybody what the myodural bridges are and where they're located.
We picked this paper because it's fascinating and really explains a bit about why upper cervical works. And so right now we're looking at the suboccipital muscles, which are connected between the base of the skull, C1 and C2. And we always talk about that. That's the Craniocervical Junction. This is kind of where we live as upper cervical chiropractors. We have the rectus capitis posterior minor, so RCP minor MI, and then rectus capitis posterior major, and then obliquus capitis inferior. And so the OCI attaches from the lateral edge of the transverse process of C1 to the spinous of C2. That actually has some fibers of this myodural bridge. That muscle has fibers of this myodural bridge, which is like a ligament that it passes through the muscle and then goes in through the bone and under the bone and into the spinal dura on the spinal cord. Now there's dura is a sheath that goes around the spinal cord, but it attaches into the cord. And so if there's tension in those muscles, so RCP minor, RCP major, and the obliquus capitis inferior, those muscles, if there's tension in those muscles, it translates into the cord. And one way that we know that happens is through misalignment of the upper cervical spine. Do you want to talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, no, we were just talking about that before we recorded, and it's a great, it's just one more way that a misalignment in the upper cervical spine can cause problems. I mean, we've gone over plenty of them in past episodes. We did one on the dentate ligament theory, as far as, putting tension on the cord. And here's another, just one more reason and one more way that a misalignment in the spine or just injury to the spine in general can really cause some health issues. Some of those health issues, some of the things in the paper that it said: cervicocephalic headaches, cervicocephalic pain syndrome. So that just means originating from the neck, causing symptoms that are in the head, or pain syndromes. Over time after injury, it can actually cause a conversion of muscle types. So from slow to fast twitch, which slow muscle fibers are going to be more for like that sensory input that we were talking about before,
Right.
Before we got on here. Some of the problems that it can happen, an injury to the myodural bridge can happen, is the dural infolding, which can really cause problems because that sheath around the spinal cord, the dura, actually have proprioceptive input, meaning it can transmit pain. And so it's meant to transmit pain, to tell the body that, hey, something's going on, something's wrong. And that can cause some issues as well. So it can cause
Nociceptive input. Is that what you
yeah,
meant?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Nociceptive.
So, so those are some of the problems that can occur. Did you want to say something?
Yeah. Well, let's break this down. So, the craniocervical junction, the upper cervical spine, right? So C1 and C2, those are the most freely movable bones in the spine. And when we talk about instability or trauma to the cervical spine, those joints are going to take the brunt of that trauma. Now, the muscles that we're talking about, the rectus capitis posterior major, rectus capitis posterior minor, obliquus capitis, those muscles are mostly sensory in nature. So if you have a trauma to the cervical spine and it misaligns the vertebra, the muscles are going to spasm or at least sense. So there's later on in this paper, it discusses the grams per muscle spindle fiber, and I think it's like 98 in one and 242 in the other, and that's tremendously more. So if you take and compare in the tiny little muscles right up here at the base of the skull. So actually, if we just look at this, so here are the little muscles we're talking about right here. This is the obliquus capitis inferior. This one right here is the, I believe that's RCP major. And then if we go up here, that's minor, or I may have them backwards, but
Yep, you got
those three muscles right there, right? So they're tiny, tiny, tiny muscles. They're sensory in nature, but they house most of, or at least from what we come to understand, they house a tremendous amount of proprioceptors in the body, or muscle spindle fibers in the body, that actually tell how your head is sitting over your spine, which being gravity beings is super important. So if you have these muscles pulling and tugging, telling your brain where things are at in space, where your head is sitting, your head weighs 10 to 15 pounds, that top neck bone weighs 2 ounces, and that bone slips out of place some, it tilts the head a little, and those guys are screaming. The myodural bridge is in the center of all that, translating that tension into the spinal cord. So you talk about cervicogenic headaches, migraines, vestibular issues, all these issues that can arise where 30, 40 years ago, a lot of people would have just kind of written off that upper cervical or chiropractic could help with those problems. But now we know there's a direct link from the muscle to the bone into the spinal cord. And so that bone being out of place, you correct it, it takes that tension out, the myodural bridge, that ligament relaxes, the cord relaxes, and the spinal cord does so much better that we call it tethering, loosens, the cerebral spinal fluid relaxes, the fluid balances better. So this is a big reason why we may have the results that we have within upper cervical chiropractic care. So I wanted to say that. But
one of many different reasons why, for sure. That kind of moves into just the functions of the myodural bridge. The paper talks about the active and passive stabilizing effect that it has, and the active part of the stabilizing is like what you just said, with the force transfer, whether it be the dura sensing tension and transmitting that to the muscles for them to stabilize, or if the muscles sense a a positional change or something that happens involuntarily, and that will translate to the dura, to the spinal cord, to stabilize it. And again, just to add on to what you say and why we get results, it would make, I mean, the intricacy, and if you just look at the picture that we showed, as far as how they're just intertwined, and if there's any injury to all of those mechanisms, obviously all of that detail is all of that detail in the upper cervical spine has to maintain its integrity in order for things to function correctly. If there's an injury to that, there's going to be problems. It's not something simple and light that we can just take for granted, when injuries happen to the upper neck. An injury to the upper neck is not like injuring your pointer finger. It's just the significance and the consequences are just completely different. Did you want to show that picture again, Dr.?
Well, I was just going to say, and I'm sure you're probably going to show this as well, but this picture right here is where that ligament attaches. So it's probably a little bit hard to see there. I'm trying to square it up on the monitor, but that's the ligament right there going from the major rectus capitis posterior major in, and then there's minor up at the top. So minor is on the top, major is on the bottom. And, that's those two sections right there are kind of the cross section. And then as well, and I think you're going to talk about this in just a second, but the other thing I didn't mention, you've got the 242 and the 98 spindles per gram up there, that proprioception. We talk about that a lot in the upper cervical world, just in research and to other chiropractors, that's how we speak, is that neurology language, but or neuroscience language. But something that's important to remember, there's a Dan Murphy paper, great chiropractor, but he reviewed another paper that talked about in your hand, there's something like 5, like in the muscles that allow us to do opponents. That's what it is. Opponents pollicus. So anyways, this is what makes us human. And that is like 5, it's like 5 grams per muscle spindle fiber there in those muscles. It's 5, right? Or maybe like 10. In your neck, up here, you have 100 to 300 per muscle split. It's nuts. The amount of input placed on, evolution and what we needed to have our heads sit vertically over our heads or over our spines and maintain that integrity of that spinal canal. It's massive. And so you talk about millimeters of misalignment. We're talking about millimeters. Right? And your brain is instantly going, oh, it's off over there. Oh, it's off over there. Right? And so that's where these chronic problems come in, when this signaling gets off and these muscles get deranged, and then that myodural bridge gets injured. So anyways.
Absolutely. It's good.
Go on forever.
Yeah, the obliquus capitis inferior has 242 spindles per gram, and the rectus capitis posterior major has 98 spindles per gram, where the trapezius muscle, the huge muscle on our traps, has 2.2.
Yeah.
2.2 grams spindles per gram, and then the lats have 1.4. And so
punching muscle.
Yeah.
That's the muscle.
It's just the massive amount of spindles per gram there shows the importance of the sensory and everything, and again how intricate that area is and how important it is. Let me just touch on real quick, we talked about the active and passive stabilizers. I don't think I mentioned the passive. The passive is doesn't have to do with reflexes and positional movements of stabilizing the spine, but it has to do just like, you can think about it like an anchoring process.
Right.
So when you bend down, there's an anchor on the spinal cord so that it doesn't translate forward and you have like a compression myelopathy. And the same thing, when you bend your head backwards into extension, it prevents the spinal cord from enfolding in on itself and causing some problems there. A lot of the authors from the review just talk about the different functions and what they're doing.
And I think for someone who's out there researching, maybe cervicogenic vertigo, cervicogenic headaches, vestibular issues, Meniere's disease, imbalance issues, a lot of this stuff if you research and you try to figure out like, okay, I had a trauma to my head and neck, like I had a car accident, I had a concussion, I had whiplash, I had a sports injury. And then, a month later, 2 months later, a year later, 5 years later, I started to develop these symptoms. How could that be? What's happening? This is an explanation. And I'm not trying to be derogatory or negative here, but people go to doctors and they don't know the doctors don't know this information. A primary medical doctor does not, if you go into the ER after a car accident or a sports injury, unless you go to a concussion doc, and a lot of times concussion docs don't know this, that checking the neck is probably one of the most important things to do after a head and neck trauma. But you go to the ER, they're going to do a CT scan on your head and your neck, maybe an X-ray. They're not going to look at the soft tissue. And this is what Dr. Leach there and I we look at. When we look at you, we look at you as a whole body that has bones, ligaments, tendons, muscles, nerves, fluid flow imbalances, right? And so we're looking at all this stuff, and we know that this data, we know that trauma to the outside of the body can penetrate and literally go to the thing that makes you, which is your nervous system, by way of misalignment of that upper cervical spine. And so if you've had trauma and you've developed symptoms, this is a big explanation as to why. And most but doctors don't, you go to the ER, they don't know this stuff, or they might have learned it a long time ago, but they don't connect the dots. And
it's interesting you say that. Just yesterday we had a new patient call, and they were asking Shaughnessy, like, oh, well, I've tried this, I've tried that, migraines for like 14 months straight. And they say, well, why didn't my doctors tell me about this? And she came to me and she said, well, what do I tell them when they ask me that? And I'm like, tell them we don't know. We don't know why they don't know about it. We don't know why they don't refer to us. There's plenty of research. There's plenty of, there's tens of, if not hundreds of thousands of testimonials out there, of this. And hopefully, hopefully with time and more research, more and more medical doctors will start to see the importance of this. Now, to give credit where credit's due, you get in a car accident, you go to the emergency room, and they do a CT or an X-ray or whatever. It's the value of doing that is to make sure you're not dying and to make sure you're not bleeding. So there's a lot of value in doing that much of the time. The problem comes between the disconnect of when they find that there are no fractures or dislocations and your brain's not bleeding and you're not in dire need of emergency care, they send you on your way instead of getting actual medical care and health care that you need to take care of the injuries that can cause big problems in the future, and that many times do. Dr. Evans, I'm sure you could agree, you've had hundreds of consultations that, these problems started to happen maybe a year after a car accident, maybe 2 days after the car accident, or after an injury, after a fall. Happens all the time. So we're just really trying to get the word out there of where our place in the healthcare system is.
Yeah,
it's huge. It's really important to understand here.
Yeah, and this paper was written by chiropractors, so that's I think a reason this paper is so good is because it comes from a functional perspective of misalignment of the spine, and the tissue and how it's connected and what that can then mean for a patient. And then layer on top of it, we're upper cervical chiropractors, and I know that these folks were not upper cervical chiropractors, so they even see the value of this. And so being upper cervical chiropractors, that's our job, is to tell that story. And you can't hit your head without hurting your neck, and that goes back to that. I think we did that paper on Dr. Letty, Jay Letty. Maybe if we haven't, we should do it. But it's the role of the cervical spine in post-concussion syndrome. And you can't, if you have a trauma to the neck, if you have a whiplash, it's at the low end of, if you have a car accident, you have whiplash, it's at the low end of like 4 Gs. But if you have a concussion, it's at the high, at the low end for concussions, it's like 60 Gs. And the derangement of the head and the neck, right? So hitting the head, the brain jostles, it has shearing in the brain. We have all the cascade of problems in the brain, but the neck, and this is where this paper comes in. The myodural bridge is a translation directly into the central nervous system. And that's why you may continue to have post-concussion syndrome, even when that that concussion should have resolved a month ago. Right. And so, just to link back papers and other things, if we haven't already done it, we should do that. But
I don't think we have. I think we've talked
yeah.
about it before, but I think
well, we should do that. Yeah.
We can do that.
Yeah.
For sure.
So anyways, yeah.
Cool. So, I had an interesting question at the very end here. I wonder what your thoughts are on, because technically speaking, isn't a ligament between two bones? Right. So what is the myodural bridge? Is it a ligament, or is it, they didn't really define it. They said soft tissue connection. So,
it's a dural connection, right? So I don't think there's really a name. I called it a ligament. It's probably a misnomer, but I think in the paper they said ligament, but and I was like, I don't think it's a ligament. It's a dural connection.
Yeah.
So it's part of the dura, and that should be where the emphasis is placed. Right. Is that it's dura linking to your musculature.
Right.
That is sensory in nature. Yeah. With millimeters of misalignment of a bone that moves more than any other bone in the spine, that holds the head up, the weight of the head, 10 to 15 pounds, and it's 2 ounces. So you got all that happening at a dural connection to your central nervous system. So anyways, does that make sense?
I don't know if you did it, or I definitely didn't do it. Should we use the model to show people, just in case they can't really tell so the picture that Dr. Evans brought up was, it was a sagittal slice. So it was kind of, one of them was a slice in the middle there. So when you have the rectus capitis posterior minor that connects this part to this part here, and then the rectus capitis posterior major here to here, and then you have the obliquus capitis inferior that connects this from here. So you've got these muscles back here, right, in the back of the head, right? Here's the head, the top bone, atlas, and axis, the second one. So the muscles are back here, and those myodural bridges are coming through from the muscle back here to the back part of where that spinal cord is. So the spinal cord is right there, and it's coming from the muscles back here and connecting there, so that any sort of misalignment in the upper cervical spine is, so for example, just for an exaggerated example, if you've got a misalignment like this, and then the muscles maybe on one side are going to contract because it's trying to stabilize your head, and so that you don't just fall over, that contraction of those muscles is going to translate that force into the spinal cord and into the dura, which can then create problems. So again, injury and misalignment to the upper cervical spine, those myodural bridges, when they lose their integrity, they can cause health problems. And so that's where we come in, and even massage, or even some PT in some cases, just fixing the upper cervical spine and getting the upper cervical spine corrected. And that's just one of the ways that it can create health problems.
You got it. Great job.
Good. Thank you. Do you have any other last thoughts on the importance of the myodural bridge, or any last conclusions or anything?
No, I think that's good.
Cool. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Evans, and we'll see you on the next podcast.
Awesome. See you soon.
Yep. Thank you. Okay, that's it for this episode. So what did you learn that fascinated you or surprised you about the research today? Join or start the conversation in the comments below. Hey, thanks so much for watching. To watch more of our research shows, click or tap the screen right there. To subscribe to the channel, click or tap the screen right there. Until next time, I'm Dr. Kevin Leach with the Upper Cervical Chiropractic Research Show, bringing awareness to conservative primary spine care, upper cervical chiropractic care, and traditional chiropractic. Until next time, take care and take care of your spine. It's the only one you'll ever have.